In the not-so-distant future, the sprawling cityscape shimmered under a twilight sky, its towering structures piercing through the clouds. Overhead, the rhythmic wop-wop WPP of spherical flying craft echoed as their powerful searchlights swept across the vast urban expanse. Morty clutched his head in pure terror as the monstrous aliens, weapons drawn, bellowed aggressively before him. Beside him, Beth screamed, eyes wide with horror, desperately throwing up a hand to shield herself from the sudden, chaotic threat. With a jarring crash, Rick, clad in a tactical mask, repelled dramatically through the shattered window. Below, Morty's eyes were wide with pure terror as he raised his hands, while Summer recoiled beside him, her face a mask of disgusted annoyance as she squeezed her eyes shut. As a furious barrage of pew-pew-pew erupted, two enraged aliens roared, tearing apart the environment around them with their relentless assault. Below, a masked Morty, clutching his rifle, desperately clung to cover, his face a grimace of fear and concentration as he braced for the brutal onslaught. The room erupted around them with a deafening boom and a barrage of pew-pew, shattering the furniture and sending debris flying. Morty, reeling from the sudden assault, hunched over, a pained gasp escaping his lips as the chaos engulfed him. Jerry's face was a mask of pure terror, his eyes wide and jaw agape as he threw up a hand, screaming, "Summer." His frantic call echoed his desperate fear for his daughter's safety. Just as Jerry's terror peaked, the furious alien swung its weapon with precise brutality, connecting with a sickening bosh that sent blood and spittle erupting from his face as he absorbed the devastating blow. Despite the fresh bruise darkening her eye, Beth's expression was a mask of grim resolve. Clutching a strange, lumpy device, her hardened gaze swept across the chaotic scene, seemingly ready to confront whatever fresh hell lay ahead. The angry purple bruise under Beth's eye was a fresh wound, yet her stern gaze hardened, showing only grim resolve. With her laser gun clutched firmly in hand, she squared her shoulders, ready to face down the ongoing chaos with unyielding determination. Beth, a fresh bruise visible under her eye, glared defiantly upwards, twin blasters raised. Above her, two hulking green aliens, one with a massive weapon, glowered down, ready to attack. The two imposing green aliens, blasters at the ready, stared ahead with intense, unyielding gazes. Their furrowed brows and taut stances betrayed a readiness for the impending confrontation. Beth, a fresh bruise visible under her eye, clenched her jaw and tightened her grip on the twin blasters. Sweat beaded on her brow as she squeezed her eyes shut, steeling herself with grim resolve for what was coming next. The two green aliens above smirked confidently, one clutching blasters as they seemed to gloat over their surroundings. Below, Beth remained hidden, a bead of sweat tracing her temple as she tightly squeezed her eyes shut, desperate to avoid detection. Ignoring the fresh bruise under her eye, Beth let out a raw "aughh" as she desperately unleashed a furious "braka-braka" from her twin blasters, green energy blasts slamming into the shadowy figures. Her wide-eyed grimace conveyed both her pain and fierce determination to fight on. As a massive kaboom erupted behind them, Beth emerged from the smoke and flames, a determined smirk on her face as she cradled a wide-eyed, disoriented Morty. He clung to her, clearly startled by their explosive departure from the danger. Beth lay with a faint smirk, a fresh bruise visible beneath her eye, as she hummed softly, "HM," to her partner's gentle touch. With eyes closed in quiet contentment, he then asked, "And that one?" tracing another mark on her skin. Jerry, his eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and concern, looked up at Beth, asking, "How'd you get that scar?" Beth, in turn, cast a weary, almost resigned gaze down at him, her fresh bruise and band-aid silently speaking volumes about her latest adventures. Beth's eyes drifted upward, a weary "OH," escaping her lips, as if the explanation for her new bruise and bandaged arm wasn't worth the effort to articulate. Yet a subtle, almost defiant smirk lingered, hinting at a story Beth was either too tired or too satisfied to fully divulge. Beth lay in her bed, a faint scratch visible on her shoulder, as she wearily offered, "It's a long story." Her gaze, distant and heavy with unspoken chaos, conveyed a profound exhaustion that went far beyond the visible injury. Present day. Summer, her eyes wide and a little dazed, sat on the toilet, mindlessly cramming pizza into her mouth as she still clutched a smoking weapon. This chaotic scene, with a hot dog plate balanced on her stomach, was just another weary moment in her increasingly absurd daily routine. A jarring thwack echoed from the roof of the Smith residence, followed by Morty's familiar, pained OW. It hinted at another one of Rick's chaotic experiments, concluding with a mild mishap, as the tumultuous day itself drew to a close. Morty's familiar, pained cry was swiftly overwhelmed by a rapid, frantic rat-a-tat-a emanating from the roof, suggesting Rick was already embroiled in a chaotic struggle above their heads. Amidst a furious barrage of laser fire, a terrified pizza slice messenger with wide, desperate eyes dashed forward, yelling SIR. "Sir!" Urgent news from the front. Rick's sharp command of "take cover" cut through the chaos as the frantic messenger struggled to deliver its vital message. The terrified pizza slice messenger let out a desperate GH as searing laser fire, braca braca, tore violently through its body, scattering toppings everywhere. Morty undoubtedly watched in wide-eyed horror, while Rick likely offered a cynical, detached remark on the efficiency of the weaponry. Amidst the lingering chaos, Summer cried out in panicked desperation, "Medic! We need a medic," as she gazed upon the fallen pizza slice messenger. Nearby, the burger character gasped, "Jesus!" and the hot dog let out a pained HUNNH, both reeling in shock at the grim sight. Despite Summer's previous panicked cry for a medic, the injured burger creature, bleeding and sweating, impatiently snarled, "Get me a goddamn medic." "No!" Summer, her own eyes wide with desperation and anger, promptly retorted, "Bunface. Are you deaf?" With a look of sheer desperation, Summer crouched low, trying to comfort the failing food creature. As its life ebbed with a weak GNG, she softly urged, "Shoo. Shoo. Shoo. It's okay, buddy. I'm here. Stay with me right here," her hand clutching its wounded form as if to anchor it to life. With a desperate gaze, Summer cradled the whimpering pizza creature's arm, softly reassuring it, "SHH. Don't try to talk, okay? Just relax." The bleeding, tearful creature struggled to utter a weak NN, its wide eyes filled with agony as Summer tried to comfort it. The grievously wounded pizza creature, barely clinging to life, reached out to Summer with a desperate plea, "General Summer? Is that you? Urgent message." Summer's wide, empathetic gaze reflected her growing alarm as she registered the creature's final, vital words. Summer, her eyes wide with a desperate panic, pleaded with the grievously wounded pizza creature, "What is it, Greastain? Tell me." The creature, struggling to hold on, could only manage a choked, tearful confession, their CCC cough, its words lost to its fading strength. The grievously wounded pizza creature, its X-marked eyes staring blankly, managed a raspy CC coming H through its lolling tongue. Summer, her eyes wide with dawning horror, could only utter a terrified OH/NO in response to the grim warning. A thunderous kaboosh tore through the air, sending Summer reeling to her knees as the pizza creature exploded into gruesome pieces beside her. Clutching her throbbing head, a mix of horror and pain contorted her face, the terrifying aftermath searing into her memory. Engulfed in a cloud of dust and debris from the blast, Summer instinctively brought a hand to her face, her eyes squeezed shut in discomfort. A pained GH escaped her lips as the chaotic aftermath settled around her. Summer remained on her knees, dazed from the impact of the blast, as her burger-headed ally reached out in concern, asking, "General, are you okay?" Still disoriented, Summer could only manage a distraught bunface. The taquitos, where, while behind them, the donut and hot dog soldiers continued their fierce assault. Summer gazed at her burger-headed ally, who, with wide, frantic eyes and hands raised, declared, "I'm sorry, General, but we can't go back now. There's no time." The urgency of his words, coupled with the panicked looks of their frybox and donut companions amidst the ongoing explosion, painted a grim picture of their desperate situation. Summer's expression tightened with fierce resolve, cutting off her burger-headed ally's frantic plea with a swift, powerful punch. Her fist connected with a resounding KRK, sending the ally's head snapping back as tears and mustard erupted from the brutal impact. Summer, turning her back to the grim scene, coldly commanded, "Find the time," leaving her burger-headed ally incapacitated on the floor. Her remaining food-themed companions looked on with a mix of terror and grim determination as the chaotic situation escalated. Summer, her determined gaze cutting back over her shoulder, delivered her final, urgent warning, "Otherwise, we've already lost." Her unwavering expression left no doubt about the high stakes and the grim alternative. Summer, her eyes wide with a resolute fury, turned her intense gaze upon the remaining group. "And as for the rest of you, saddle up," she demanded, leaving no room for argument. Summer's determined eyes burned as she raised a makeshift flag, her voice ringing out with a furious rallying cry. "We've got a war to fight," she declared, her words igniting a fierce resolve in the motley crowd of sentient food items who roared their agreement around her. The smoke finally cleared, leaving a charred divot in the roof of Banana B's, prompting Rick to slowly draw out a cynical "Sue," assessing the immediate aftermath of Summer's furious rampage. The hiring manager, a man with a neatly trimmed mustache, paused his careful review of the application, a hint of skepticism flickering in his gaze. "Under experience with leadership and/or food management," you wrote. "Technically, yes. Would you care to elaborate?" he asked, patiently awaiting an explanation. With her arms tightly crossed, Summer watched the scene unfold, a familiar look of skeptical impatience etched across her face. Her wide eyes and flat mouth perfectly conveyed her utter lack of surprise at Rick's latest antics, yet a hint of growing weariness was also evident. Summer's gaze remained fixed, her arms still tightly crossed, a clear signal of her growing impatience. A hint of exasperation touched her lips as she continued to observe the unfolding scene. Beth, her arms tightly crossed, held a firm gaze as she delivered her resolute "No," putting an end to whatever absurdity she'd been forced to endure. Her simple refusal seemed to close the chapter, marked by the finality of "Yendi." After Beth's firm "No" echoed, the scene abruptly shifted, replacing the family's tension with a bold title, Rick and Morty IN, Adventure 2 and Alternate Universe. It appeared that Rick's chaotic plans, much to Morty's likely dread, were still full steam ahead. The tranquil exterior of the Smith household offered little calm as a profound "Yuwuk, Urag" echoed from within. It was Rick, no doubt, likely suffering the immediate, miserable consequences of Beth's earlier, resolute "No." Morty, his face a mask of exasperation, tried desperately to rouse Rick from his drunken slumber, calling out, "Rick, wake up. I need your help in the garage." But Rick remained sprawled on the couch in a drooling stupor, his only response a pathetic, gurgling "UGH, UUHHH, SNRRK." Barely rousing from his messy slumber, Rick's unfocused eyes fluttered open as he declared, "I was having the weirdest dream, Morty. In it, I was the brilliant scientist and you were my bumbling, idiot companion." Despite his disheveled state, Rick still managed to insult his grandson with a groggy, "You were a real idiot, Morty." Still slumped and drooling green on the couch, Rick's wide, glazed eyes settled on Morty and he unsteadily commanded, "Now, follow me out to the garage, genius." Utterly exasperated by his grandpa's sudden directive, Morty waved a dismissive hand as he turned away, muttering, "Yeah, well, you know what they say about dreams, right? They're stupid and don't matter." Still slumped and drooling, Rick's unfocused gaze settled as he snorted, "Maybe snort, maybe you can help me with my experiment." A cruel, hazy chuckle followed. "Haha, you know a lot about quantum entanglement, right? I think it was in your dissertation," his words dripping with the usual sarcastic condescension directed at Morty. Morty, engrossed in tinkering at the workbench, barely registered Rick's impatient appearance over his shoulder. "Geez, took you long enough, huh?" "Bring me the Phillips screwdriver," Rick barked, to which Morty, without missing a beat, calmly replied, "It's the one that looks like the X." Slumped and still drooling, Rick clutched a hammer, his half-lidded eyes casting a bitter gaze as he scoffed, "But you probably knew that already, right, genius?" "Haha." He then grandly declared, "Rick Sanchez, brilliant scientist." Ha ha ha, completely ignored by Morty, who remained engrossed in his own work at the bench. Still seething with green drool clinging to his lips, Rick gripped his hammer tighter and raged, "I can't wait until I tell the Council of Mortys about this." Completely unbothered, Morty just offered a subtle, knowing smile, meticulously continuing his work as if Rick's outburst was merely background noise. Morty practically vibrated with eager anticipation, his eyes wide and hands clasped as he exclaimed, "Gee, Rick. I can't wait to see the world where Morty's the Rick and Rick's the Morty. I've been looking forward to this all day, Rick." Rick, with a slight, almost imperceptible smirk, observed his grandson's innocent enthusiasm, arms akimbo as a vibrant green portal pulsed beside them. Rick, still smirking, playfully nudged Morty towards the swirling green portal, quipping, "Maybe I'll just stay here in the world where Morty's in charge, huh?" With a light tap to his grandson's head, Rick added, "Haha. Get in there, ya knucklehead," as Morty eagerly plunged into the unknown. Rick's face contorted in a mask of pure terror, his arm instinctively tightening around a petrified Morty as a horrifying SBRCH, shunk, chuck, slurk of impacts filled the air. Before them, a bloodied Rick was being brutally hammered, leaving Morty's wide eyes glued to the grotesque and shocking violence unfolding. Rick and Morty sat side by side on the couch, their faces frozen in a shared mask of wide-eyed horror and silent shock, a stark contrast to their usual dynamic. Whatever unspeakable terror they had just witnessed had left both the nihilistic scientist and his impressionable grandson utterly speechless as the panel drew to an end. And Interlude with Jerry marked a shift in perspective. As the insistent bzzzt of his alarm clock at 6:30 shattered the quiet, Jerry lay in bed, his half-closed eyes and utterly resigned expression conveying his profound reluctance to face another mundane day. Jerry stared blankly at his reflection, the mundane brusha of his toothbrush doing little to stir him from his morning stupor. His tired eyes reflected a familiar, quiet resignation as he faced another day. Jerry Smith drove with a familiar, distant look, the morning commute stretching endlessly before him. As a string of musical notes floated through his mind, the melody seemed to underscore the persistent hum of his utterly mundane existence. Jerry slumped at his desk, his eyes dull as he stared at the screen, while the cheerful chatter of his laughing colleagues echoed over the cubicle walls. The vibrant morning energy of his office mates seemed only to deepen Jerry's quiet, resigned despair. At the family dinner, Rick's usual manic energy erupted with a raised, gesticulating hand, yet it barely registered among the others. Jerry continued to pick at his spaghetti with a weary, distant look, while Beth wore a flat expression, and Summer remained utterly absorbed in her phone, leaving only Morty to genuinely enjoy his meal. As Beth slept soundly beside him, her back to the world, Jerry lay wide awake in the dark, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. A quiet turmoil churned within him, leaving him isolated with his unspoken anxieties in the stillness of the night. Beth, however, lay in a deep, undisturbed slumber, her back turned to the world. The quiet darkness brought her only peace, a comfort unknown to Jerry's restless gaze. Outside, the night had fully settled upon the Smith residence, its dark exterior a quiet shell. While Beth slept peacefully within, and Rick was likely tinkering away, Jerry lay awake, wrestling with the silence of his own mind. With the night fully settled, Morty appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide and searching. Clutching something small in his hands, he seemed lost in thought, a silent distress etched across his face as he looked out into the quiet darkness. Morty, his earlier searching gaze now hardened with a desperate resolve, swiftly pulled open the car door and slid into the driver's seat. The dark night pressed in around him, hinting at an urgent and perhaps unwelcome journey to find Rick. With a desperate resolve hardening his young face, Morty wasted no time, reversing Rick's car from the garage. The headlights sliced through the quiet suburban night, illuminating his path towards whatever urgent purpose now drove him. Jerry Smith drove silently, his eyes half-lidded and gaze distant as he hummed a quiet, aimless tune, the melody escaping his lips as if to fill the void of his thoughts. Seemingly oblivious or resigned to the desperate situation Morty had just navigated, Jerry steered them forward, lost in his own mundane world. As Jerry Smith drove, a quiet, aimless tune bubbled up from his thoughts, filling the silent car. His half-lidded gaze remained distant, betraying a deep, almost resigned detachment from the chaotic world outside. Jerry Smith, having pulled over, now sat atop his car, letting the aimless tune he'd been humming burst forth into the quiet night. As music notes swirled around him under the twinkling stars, a rare sense of serene, unburdened peace seemed to settle on him, lost in his own melody. Jerry Smith's quiet, aimless tune, now fully manifest, gently spilled from him, each note a flowing current against the backdrop of the serene, star-dusted night. This simple, unburdened melody was a rare moment of peaceful expression, drifting through the cosmic expanse. Jerry Smith's quiet, aimless tune, now fully manifest, gently spilled from him, each note a flowing stream of simple sound that settled over the sleeping town. His humble melody, a quiet counterpoint to the scattered lights below, gave a fleeting, tender voice to the silent, starry night. As the 6:30 a.m. alarm buzzed incessantly, Jerry lay awake, his eyes holding a weary, perhaps content, glint despite the early hour. Suddenly, Rick's slurred voice, punctuated by a burp, broke the morning calm, asking, "Is it, Jerry? Is IURP, really? Or is it another?" Dressed sharply in a suit, Jerry Smith descended the stairs, adjusting his tie with a determined air as he brightly declared, "Good morning, family." His wide, almost unnervingly cheerful eyes suggested a man ready to embrace the day, perhaps even convincing himself in the process. As Jerry Smith, looking weary yet determined, adjusted his tie while descending the stairs, Rick Sanchez watched him with a half-lidded, cynical gaze, delivering a slurred, backhanded, "I don't know how you do it, Jerry." His voice then sharpened into a familiar nihilistic interrogation, questioning the very purpose of Jerry's existence. Is it really? Or is it another day of slaving away at your dead-end job to make ends meet, for what you know? Jerry Smith listened, a somber and slightly weary expression on his face, as Rick's unexpected words floated to him. Rick, in a rare moment of admiration, declared, "I don't know how in spite of a world that continually kicks you in the balls, you keep going. You're a braver man than me, Jerry." Amidst the distant hum of traffic and the faint, cheerful notes of a passing car's radio, Rick's unexpected words lingered in the air, a rare and raw admission for Jerry to absorb. "You're a braver man than me," Rick confessed, his voice perhaps carrying a weight Jerry had never heard before. Beneath the stark glow of the rat hole sign, a curious line formed in a grimy alley as the announcement blared, "Introducing Beth and the Beths." A motley collection of individuals, many bearing an unsettling resemblance to Beth, waited with a mix of eager anticipation and weary resignation for what promised to be a truly unique, if chaotic, performance. As the raucous punk band unleashed a sonic assault, the crowd roared in ecstasy. Morty, likely dragged along for yet another interdimensional experience, was completely swallowed by the chaos, his wide eyes and agape mouth reflecting a mixture of shock and exhilaration. "Son de vam idier." Rick, likely observing with a cynical smirk, watched as the deafening punk rock anthems and flashing stage lights transformed the venue into a chaotic, seething mass of bodies. Poor Morty, no doubt overwhelmed, could only be swept along by the raw, unbridled energy of the frantic mosh pit. The raucous set concluded with the lead singer Beth's triumphant declaration, "We're Beth and the Beths. Good night." Her sweaty bandmates, eyes wild with exhilaration, reveled in the final pulsing chords, their passionate fans cheering them on. The crowd erupted in a fervent chant for their idol, roaring, "Beth! Come back, and I love you, as Beth stood under the spotlight, soaking in the triumphant cries of, "You're the greatest, Beth," from her adoring fans. Beth looked wide-eyed and slightly overwhelmed as the adoring crowd clamored for her, with one fervent fan crying out, "I love you, Beth." Her attempt to move was abruptly halted when a desperate hand reached out with a grab, clinging tightly to her leg. Beth's face contorted in a furious snarl, her eyes narrowed and teeth bared as a frustrated grr escaped her lips. The unexpected adoration had clearly pushed her past her breaking point, turning awe into simmering irritation. Fueled by her previous frustration, Beth unleashed a fierce kick, connecting with a jarring punt that sent the hapless fan reeling. Her eyes burned with a determined fury as the other Beth, standing by with a guitar, looked on with a focused, almost approving intensity. With a furious roar of "fight," several Beths unleashed their pent-up rage, swinging guitars and fists into the bewildered crowd. The scene erupted into a chaotic mosh pit of startled punk rockers, caught off guard by the sheer ferocity of the attacks. A furious Beth landed a powerful punch to another Beth's face, drawing blood and eliciting an "OOF" from her stunned victim, while the Beth in the middle watched with an intense, focused gaze. Meanwhile, another Beth, clutching a drumstick, looked away with wide, almost oblivious eyes, asking, shoot, what time is it?" After the violent outburst, Beth's wide eyes darted to her wrist, mouth agape as she questioned, 5:45? A sudden, disoriented realization about the passing time amidst the chaos washed over her. Still reeling from the chaos, Beth on the floor managed a resigned smile and called out, "Okay, see ya, Beth." The departing Beth, however, shot back a frantic glance, already halfway through a shimmering green portal as she exclaimed, "Dang it. Sorry, I've gotta go." As the fizzling green portal hummed, a smiling blonde woman waved cheerfully, calling out later, "Beth," to the injured Beth on the floor. Beth, bloodied and wide-eyed, could only watch in horrified disbelief as her tormentor escaped through the shimmering gateway. With her cheerful farewell still echoing, the blonde woman, strikingly similar to Beth, surged through the shimmering green portal. Her eyes held a focused intensity, hand firmly on her portal gun, as the ZZZT sound confirmed her swift, practiced departure. Beth, her back turned, reached into the designated box of Rick's stuff. With a distinct drop, she unceremoniously added a glowing green device to the collection, a final, almost dismissive gesture after her recent departure. Beth let out a weary, "Is identical to SGH is identical to," her gaze heavy with a familiar mix of exhaustion and resignation as her hand found the doorknob. The weight of her complicated feelings for her father settled on her shoulders as she prepared to leave the room. Beth, her weariness evident, turned to Jerry and asked, "How is book club?" Jerry, slumped at the table with a pen poised over his book, lifted his head slightly, his wide, vacant eyes fixed on nothing in particular as he flatly replied, "Okay." Beth, shutting the weight of her earlier weariness, closed her eyes and let a soft, private melody escape her lips. Musical notes danced around her as she swayed gently, finding a rare moment of unburdened joy in the quiet house. Gazing out at the shimmering city lights from the railing, Morty mused on his epic adventures, from the universe's edge to glittering alien palaces. Yet, a palpable sense of emptiness pervaded his voice as he softly confessed to his companion, But I'm standing still, feeling a profound disconnect from his extraordinary past." Morty, his wide eyes betraying a deep weariness, slumped against the railing and confessed, "I'm cemented to this spot. I could spend the rest of my life running around the universe and never move." Summer turned her gaze to her brother, her own expression hinting at a quiet concern for his increasingly despondent outlook. As Morty confessed his weariness, Beth's wide, compassionate eyes turned to him, her expression a soft, understanding smile. She offered a quiet reassurance, next to you, a gentle presence against the overwhelming backdrop of their shared reality. With a look of earnest conviction, Beth stated, "I'm not asking to move. It's too late for that. I'm asking you to come with me." Morty met her gaze, his expression wide and uncertain, as she softly added, Morty. Morty, clutching Beth's hand with earnest desperation, looked up at her and implored, "Travel the universe with me." Beth's wide eyes met his, her expression shifting to one of genuine surprise and contemplation at his unexpected, heartfelt plea. Responding to Morty's earnest plea, Beth pulled her grandson into a tender embrace on the waterfront, her soft, Morty. A sigh mixing weariness with reluctant affection. As the city lights twinkled around them, she held him close, acknowledging his heartfelt desire. As the night deepened, Morty's bedroom lay quiet and still, its familiar posters and oddities bathed in the gentle glow of moonlight. The silent space seemed to hold the echoes of his heartfelt plea to Beth and her comforting embrace. With playful mischief, Morty carried Beth into his room, firmly shutting the door behind them with a decisive slam. Beth, her arms still wrapped around her grandson, closed her eyes in satisfied contentment, murmuring, "Yes." Beth passionately embraced Morty, her leg lifting as their lips met, and she murmured, "Morty, I've wanted this for so long." As Morty held her close, he returned her fervent kiss, a tender longing echoing in the quiet of his room. Flushed from their intimate moment, Morty eagerly leaned into Beth, his eyes wide as he proposed, "Just wait till I show you the sunrise on Io. Or the beaches of Glagspar, 7. Beth, responding to his enthusiasm with a soft smile and a gentle hand on his leg, seemed completely drawn into his unexpected promise of interdimensional romance. Beth, a playful smirk dancing on her lips, tugged Morty closer by his shirt and purred, "If you play your cards right, tonight you just might see what comes between Saturn and Neptune." Morty, wide-eyed and flustered by her bold suggestion, could only manage a stunned, "You mean you are?" Morty, startled by a sudden sound, looked up with wide, questioning eyes and asked, Did you hear something?" But Beth's hand firmly gripped his shirt, pulling him closer as she sharply dismissed his concern with a terse, "Just forget it, percent at hashtag." Morty's wide eyes screamed in terror as a gloved hand burst through his shirt, tearing it open to reveal an unsettling, ribbed mechanism now attached to him. "What did you just... What?" he stammered, his expression a perfect blend of shock and violated disbelief. "Where are you going? $% hashtag at," snarled the monstrous alien, its yellow eyes blazing with savage intent as its clawed hand dug deeper into Morty. Morty shrieked in pure horror, his wide gaze fixed on the sickening shrip as his shirt ripped open further, revealing grotesque yellow fluid. Morty's desperate "AAA" ripped through the night, a chilling echo of the terror that had just ripped his shirt. The quiet suburban street offered no refuge, as the sound of splintering glass from the window confirmed his terrifying ordeal was far from over. Awakened abruptly by the chilling echoes of Morty's terror, Beth shot upright in bed, eyes wide with horror as a raw "AAAH" ripped from her own throat. Clutching the blankets, she looked around frantically, a terrible premonition seizing her. Awakened by the terror, Beth sat up sharply in bed, her wide eyes staring into the dim room as she processed the harrowing experience. "Well, I've got some stuff to work through," she uttered, her hands flat on the blanket, grappling with the chaotic reality of her family's life. Morty lay still in his bed, his eyes wide and fixed on the ceiling, unable to shake the lingering terror that had just ripped through him. The night, now a chilling void, enveloped him as the saga continued in Rick and Morty Into the Void. The empty bed lay silent, a stark contrast to the lingering terror that had gripped Morty just moments before. Unable to find peace, he had finally risen, leaving the quiet room in search of something. Slumped on the couch, Rick groggily questioned Morty's late-night presence. What are you doing up, MURRP? Morty, quickly adding a dismissive, "I'm not going to change the channel if that's what you want. This ISTHS is Grandpa's time." Morty, still visibly rattled and clutching his hands, could only manage a timid, "Rick," as he stood barefoot in the doorway, his wide eyes betraying a deep unease. Morty, clutching his head in panic, stammered to Rick about the day's near-death experience, agonizing, I mean, we almost died, Rick. What is death anyway?" Rick, however, responded with dismissive exasperation, crossing his arms and sighing, "Oh, Jesus. Really, Morty? That's what this is about." Morty, still visibly shaken and trying to assert some control, pleaded with Rick, "Don't ask any stupid questions, just come with me, okay?" Green drool still clinging to his lip, Rick bristled, "Okay, come with me why you spoiled little at $$S%. I want to show you something," as he stepped forward, ready to drag his grandson into whatever chaotic solution he'd concocted. Rick, taking a casual swig from his beer, gazed dismissively at his grandson and declared, "Well, here we are. I hope you're happy, Morty." Morty, still barefoot and looking utterly bewildered, could only meet Rick's stare, the implicit blame heavy in the air of their cluttered garage. Rick, completely unfazed by his own disturbing anecdote, clarifies to his increasingly horrified grandson, "I was right in the middle of an Alf marathon, but from a dimension where he actually gets to eat the cat. It's not just a thinly veiled euphemism over there. He literally eats the cat." Morty, eyes wide with a familiar mix of disgust and dread, could only stare as Rick then nonchalantly presented the strange red device, adding, "Anyway, here you go. Knock yourself out." Still unfazed by his own disturbing narrative, Rick gazed forward with half-lidded eyes and a cynical air. "By the way, how'd they ever slip that one by the censors, huh? That was supposed to be a children's show, right?" he pondered aloud, his tone utterly dismissive of any supposed innocence. Still unfazed by his own disturbing narrative, Rick casually extended a strange red device towards Morty, saying, "Anyway, here you go. Knock yourself out." Morty, wide-eyed and clearly still processing Rick's horrific anecdote, reluctantly accepted the object, his gaze fixed on it with a mix of apprehension and surprise. Morty clutched the peculiar red device Rick had casually handed him, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and alarm as a dark, viscous liquid oozed from its side. "What is it, Rick?" he stammered, his gaze fixed on the unsettling contraption, dread already beginning to pool in his stomach. Dripping with green drool, Rick nonchalantly explained the red device would show Morty what death is like, urging him to just open it up. Morty, clutching the ominous box with wide, frightened eyes, could only stammer a bewildered, "Wait, what?" Rick's detached voice continued, casually describing the bizarre red device as a means to experience death, a morbid pastime for bored teenagers in other dimensions. Morty clutched contraption, his wide eyes and slightly agape mouth betraying a mix of terrified apprehension and a reluctant, morbid curiosity at Rick's chilling invitation to open it up and discover what lay beyond the veil. Morty clutched the bizarre red device to his chest, his eyes wide with a familiar, terrified apprehension. Looking up at Rick, his voice trembled as he pleaded, but what if I don't like what I see?" Rick, looking utterly spent with green drool clinging to his lip, fixed Morty with tired eyes. "Why do you think I stay up all night watching Alf marathons, Morty?" he slurred, the question a heavy admission of his desolate, late-night reality. Morty Smith continued to clutch the strange red device, his wide, worried eyes looking upward with a mixture of confusion and growing apprehension. The weight of Rick's recent, exhausted query seemed to settle heavily upon his young, anxious features. Rick, still bearing the green drool of his ordeal, looked over his shoulder at Morty and gruffly dismissed him. "Smart move. Now go to bed." Morty, clutching the red device, stood silently, absorbing his grandpa's abrupt command with a hint of uncertain relief. Rick Sanchez, still bearing the green drool from his ordeal, snored loudly on the couch, while Morty Smith finally found a moment of exhausted sleep curled up beside him. Their fleeting peace was shattered by a frantic voice from the television. "Oh my God. He's literally eating the cat." The panel announced Jerry and Rick's day of fun, with stark irony, as Jerry's anxious voice drifted from within the house, warning Morty not to eat too many pancakes. Soon after, he declared his departure for a job interview, asking his unseen family with a hopeful plea, "Wish your father some luck, eh?" At the breakfast table, Rick nonchalantly announced to a bewildered Morty that his bowels needed to be pretty clear today for some unknown purpose, causing Morty to exclaim, "Huh, what do you need my bowels for, Rick?" As Jerry nervously tapped his fingers, Summer simply scrolled on her phone, utterly unconcerned by the chaotic start to their day. A spoonful of cereal suspended before his mouth, Morty's eyes went wide with pure apprehension as Rick nonchalantly announced, "They need a place to stay." "So I told them I know just the grandson." He braced himself for whatever chaotic, unwelcome visitors his grandfather had just volunteered him to host. Jerry, shifting uncomfortably, announced he was off to a job interview, seeking some luck from his family. However, Beth paused mid-meal, gazing at him with open skepticism, wondering what interview he could possibly mean, while Summer fixated on his accessory, openly questioning why he carried that dumb man bag. Jerry, dejected and feeling overlooked, defensively grumbled, "I mentioned it last week. Typical of you all to forget all about me." Summer, her gaze sharp with judgment, couldn't help but question his appearance. "You're going to a job interview dressed like that?" as Rick casually continued eating, oblivious to the family drama. With a nervous, forced laugh, Jerry waved his hand, insisting, "Haha, sure I am. Gotta run, or I'll be late." His wide, somewhat desperate eyes and strained smile clearly showed the underlying anxiety of someone trying to appear confident while rushing to a crucial job interview. As Beth sat at the breakfast table, her gaze distant and weary, she couldn't help but wonder aloud, why is he carrying that dumb man bag with him? With a dismissive sigh, she quickly added, "Wait, I stopped caring forever ago," while a wide-eyed Morty quietly focused on his food, a silent observer to his mother's strained indifference. Jerry bolted down the street, casting a worried glance back as his forced cheer evaporated, his anxious expression betraying his desperate attempt to outrun the morning's unspoken tension with Beth. Morty's wide, apprehensive eyes glanced back down the quiet street, a familiar sense of dread creeping in. Far in the distance, a silhouetted Rick waved almost nonchalantly, his call to adventure likely ringing silent, but clear in Morty's mind. As Rick stood with arms wide open, his voice boomed with a familiar, yet unsettlingly casual greeting. "Hello again, old pal." Morty, his eyes bulging and a wide, almost manic grin plastered across his face, mirrored the embrace, his prior dread momentarily replaced by an unnervingly eager welcome for his grandpa. With a wide, toothy grin and eyes squeezed shut, Rick wrapped the green-shirt figure in a surprisingly heartfelt embrace, exclaiming, "Rick J19, Alpha 7, it's been too long." Rick J19, Alpha 7, though looking a little overwhelmed, leaned into the hug, a small, genuine smile gracing his face. With a wide, unnerving grin and one arm flung high, Rick Sanchez brandished his portal gun as he declared, "Are you ready for Jerry and Rick's day of fun?" Morty could only gaze up at his grandpa, a familiar wave of dread washing over him at the promise of such an inevitably chaotic outing. Jerry Smith practically glowed, his eyes wide and mouth spread in a proud grin as he held up a shirt proclaiming, "Jerry and Rick's day of." "You bet I am," he gushed, his earnest enthusiasm a rare moment of pure, unadulterated joy for a shared experience. Rick, holding the Jerry plus Rick's Day of Fun shirt, offered a wide, unsettling grin and deadpanned, "That's so smart, Jerry. No wonder you work in advertising." His eyes widened in mock wonder as he continued, "Wow, Jerry and Rick's Day of Fun? That's exactly what this is." Rick, emerging from his portal with a wide, unsettling grin and the shared t-shirt in hand, addressed Jerry, deadpanning, "I wish I was creative like you, Jerry." Jerry gazed at him, a subtle confusion on his face, as Rick continued to sarcastically claim that even curing cancer in his dimension wasn't as fulfilling as a cool slogan. The rapid rapids plunged down, hitting the water with a massive splosh that soaked the entire raft. While other passengers gasped in surprise, Rick and Morty were absolutely ecstatic, grinning widely and throwing their hands up in pure, unadulterated enjoyment of their day of fun. Morty, beaming with unadulterated joy, spread his arms wide as he reveled in the sight of the playful penguins, his laughter echoing. Even Rick, with a rare, genuine smile gracing his face, leaned into the wholesome Jerry plus Rick Day fun, seemingly content in their shared, simple pleasure. Rick's face twisted with wide-eyed distress, clutching his pack as he watched Morty careen downward, screaming in terror while his own jetpack gave a desperate sputter. Rick, with an uncharacteristically wide, almost manic grin, wound up and hurled the baseball across the park. Morty, eyes gleaming with a mix of surprise and eager anticipation, watched the speeding ball head straight for his outstretched mitt, a simple moment of joy replacing his earlier distress. As the photo strip slowly emerged, each frame painted a vivid picture of Rick and Morty's tumultuous relationship, from Rick's goofy mischief and Morty's wide-eyed panic to their rare, genuine moments of uproarious, shared laughter. These snapshots encapsulated the chaotic yet undeniable bond between the mad scientist and his impressionable grandson. With uncharacteristic, wide smiles, Morty and an alternate Rick raised their glasses, the joyful clink echoing a rare moment of shared camaraderie between them. Their gazes met, full of a fleeting contentment that belied the usual chaos of their lives. The alternate Rick, beaming with wide-eyed joy, declared to Jerry that this might just have been the best day of fun yet. Morty, however, stood with crossed arms and a wistful gaze, quietly sighing a longing, "Why can't I just, come live here?" as the alternate Rick continued, warmly seeing Jerry as the son I never had, making Morty reluctantly prepare to part with this fleeting moment of warmth. Jerry, his chin resting contemplatively in his hand, let out a wistful sigh, wondering aloud, "Why can't I just, come live here?" His downcast gaze betrayed a deep yearning as he imagined a life where he and this alternate Rick could raise Eric Stoltz and Mask Morty together, finally becoming a real family. Rick, his wide eyes earnest, placed a hand on Jerry's shoulder and confessed, "Jerry, I see you as the son I never had. I would be heartbroken if you left." With a melancholic gaze, Jerry listened as Rick insisted he couldn't put anyone through that sort of pain, adding a final, heartfelt, "You're a real catch, Jerry Smith." A real catch. With a tearful embrace, Jerry wistfully stated, "I guess I'll see you in 4 weeks." Rick, eyes squeezed shut in a rare display of genuine emotion, held him tighter, earnestly replying, "I'll be counting down the days, old friend." Slumped and looking utterly defeated, Jerry returned home, his weary, "I'm home," barely a whisper. Beth, already pouring a glass of wine, met his gaze with a concerned expression, asking, "How did the interview go?" Morty, his eyes wide with confusion, looked up at Beth and admitted, "That? I didn't get it." Beth, holding her wine glass, avoided his gaze, her expression sharp with a weary resentment as she muttered about having to go on supporting 3 generations of one family, along with a never-ending mortgage all by myself then. Jerry Smith's eyes welled up with unshed tears, his face a picture of utter defeat as he clutched a piece of equipment and heard the cutting words, "You're a real catch, Jerry Smith." The sarcastic praise only served to deepen his already profound misery. As the chapter drew to a close, a surprisingly cheerful cake adorned with smiling caricatures of Jerry and Rick lay in a pan, a strange, sweet testament to their intertwined lives. An unseen voice offered a final, wry observation, a real catch, leaving the audience to ponder the chaotic, complex reality behind such a simple, sugary facade. A tranquil, snow-covered house, a stark contrast to Jerry's previous despair, stood silent as a Blumbus carol began, a title hinting at another bizarre holiday ordeal for Rick and Morty. As winter flakes drifted gently around the quaint home, an unseen narrator's voice broke the hush with a foreboding phrase, "Every time a bell." With wide-eyed wonder, young Morty exclaimed, "Every time a bell rings, a Blumjel gets its wings," as Jerry and Beth looked on, their smiles gentle and filled with a quiet affection. In this tranquil moment by the Christmas tree, their gazes conveyed a serene domestic happiness, cherishing their son's innocent joy. Jerry enveloped a giggling young Morty in a warm hug, eyes crinkling with joy as he heartily confirmed, "Huh. It sure does, honey, it sure does." Beth watched her happy husband and son, a gentle, loving smile playing on her lips, cherishing this moment of pure, innocent family bliss. Amidst the festive decorations, a bound Jerry cried out in bewildered terror, "Wait, what? What am I doing here?" As Rick, holding a wide-eyed young Morty, chillingly suggested, "WLP. I guess we better eat this guy." Beth stood by, her gaze fixed on Jerry with a look of stunned disbelief. The bound Jerry cried out in bewilderment, "HY, what's going on, HUH? How'd I get here?" As three eerily smiling figures stared down at his struggling form with disturbing, wide-eyed delight. Their unwavering, cheerful gazes offered no explanation, only intensifying his growing horror. What? Because it happened to you? Don't be such a purse sport, Morty." Rick scoffed from the couch, indifferent to his grandson's plight. Morty, looking utterly spent, stood with heavy, tired eyes and slumped shoulders, declaring, "All right, Rick. I've had enough of this. I'm going to bed," finally breaking under the weight of the night's chaos. "I'm tired, Rick." "I'm going to bed," Morty announced, his weariness palpable. Rick's eyes bulged with indignant disbelief, his mouth agape as he protested, "You can't leave now. It's just getting to the cannibalism." With a weary wave and a soft "good night," Rick, Morty turned to leave, his patience utterly spent. But Rick, perched on the couch, defiantly jabbed a finger, declaring with a telltale burp that he'd have a great tea time, watching whatever it was, all by himself. Morty's eyes bulged with pure, unadulterated terror, his head thrown back as a gut-wrenching scream tore from his throat. "Oh God. My intestines. They're eating he shrieked, writhing in unimaginable pain as his own body seemed to turn against him. As Morty's terrified scream tore through the air, Rick barely stirred on the couch, his eyes heavy-lidded and body slumped. He gave a weary, dismissive mumble of whatever. And Morty, already succumbing to sleep's embrace despite the chaos. Despite Morty's frantic, repeated pleas of Rick. Rick, the mad scientist, lay utterly unresponsive. Rick Sanchez remained deeply unconscious on the couch, drool escaping his mouth, completely oblivious to the fresh terror his grandson faced. Morty's urgent plea, "Wake up, Rick," finally pierced the alcoholic haze, stirring Rick from his deep slumber. With a sluggish, drool-laced grumble, Rick's eyes barely cracked open as he muttered a disoriented, "HNH? Was it?" Barely conscious and still slumped on the couch with a dull ache behind his eyes, Rick Sanchez finally registered the frantic apparition floating before him. "Rick Sanchez. It's me, the spirit of some guy you once saw at a bus stop and made eye contact with," the chained ghost desperately declared, as Rick simply pressed a hand to his forehead, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. As Rick's blurred vision slowly cleared, a green, chained specter with wide, frantic eyes emerged, its voice raspy as it warned, "Tonight you're going to be visited by..." The apparition's desperate gaze seemed to bore into Rick, hinting at an ominous encounter he wouldn't soon forget. Still slumped and drooling green bile, Rick Sanchez barely managed to open his heavy-lidded eyes, his expression a mix of hangover and utter disinterest. Yeah. 3 ghosts. Got it," he mumbled dismissively, clearly unimpressed by whatever fantastical explanation was being offered. The green, chained specter coolly observed Rick's agitated state, noting, "Never saw one of those before." Rick, meanwhile, threw his arms wide at the pulsing pink portal, declaring with a dramatic eye roll, "Let's get this enormous cliché over with." Ooh. A portal. Scary. The veil of the past lifted, revealing a spectral woman gazing with sorrow at a young Morty, who crumpled to the floor, his face hidden by his hands in a despairing cry. Rick Sanchez stood over him, arms akimbo, his hardened gaze holding a familiar, grim detachment. The present found Morty crumpled on the floor, openly weeping next to a spilled coffee maker, his small body racked with profound sorrow. Rick Sanchez stood over him, hands on hips, observing with a complicated gaze, while the green-robed spectral man, resembling the ghost of Christmas present, looked on with wide-eyed, somber concern. Standing in a snow-covered future graveyard, Rick Sanchez faced a spectral figure, desperately pleading, "Please, spirit, let me go back. There's still time." The grim headstone before him, marking his demise by a toy train, underscored the horrifying fate he sought to undo. With desperate eyes and pleading hands, Rick Sanchez cried out to the spectral figure, "Please, spirit, let me go back. There's still time," but the chained ghost merely gazed back, a chilling, unyielding smirk playing on its lips. Rick Sanchez sat utterly engrossed in a violent TV show, screaming, "Oh God. Now they're eating my face," barely acknowledging the spectral, chained form of Morty Smith in the doorway. A disheartened Morty, his eyes wide with disappointment, could only lament being an interruption to Rick's entertainment. "Tio, catch the end of this show, dog."